There are many people who dismiss Deep Space Nine in favor of the original or the Next Generation. Although I, too, am a fan of both of Roddenberry's visions, there is no version of Star Trek I do not enjoy. None. As you can tell by my uniform, had I the chance to attend Starfleet Academy, I would have studied the life sciences.
Who's cutting my class? Where's Larry Crowne?
Maybe you got the flu.
Mr. Mack, I apologize. Please continue on with Star Wars in the deep space.
I can't even begin to tell you the difference between Star Trek and Lucas's Star Wars saga.
Hello, listening people.
Hello.
Hello, Bartek. How are you doing?
I think I'm doing well, Ryan. How are you?
You think or you know you're doing well?
I know, I think it hurts.
The thinking part hurts. Well, for me, I'm in trouble because there's a snake in my boot.
Whoa, are you Jim Hanks?
I'm Chet Hanks, unfortunately, the real successful Hanks. And that's important because they did star in the film that we are discussing today.
It was a Chet Hanks film, yeah.
Yeah, it was a Chet Hanks joint.
His dad made it for him.
His daddy made it for him. Chet Hanks, everyone. You know what, Bartek?
He's a lot more subtle than Will Smith when he made a film for his son.
You know what? I think we should give it up for Chet Hanks. The most successful Hanks family member. Fuck you, Colin Hanks. You may have been in many films and movies and TV shows and books and whatever. You've been in everything. Colin Hanks has been that guy. You go, oh, that guy. But this is a Chet-approved podcast. We are no longer Spit and Polish Presents. We are Chet-approved podcast. That's what we do on this podcast. In the film,
he had really good chemistry with Emma Roberts' aunt.
Oh, I'm sweating thinking about Emma Roberts being in this movie. She could have been in this film. Could you imagine the energy she would have brought to this movie?
The energy she would bring to kissing Tom Hanks?
Oh yeah, she could play the teacher. I was just thinking Emma Roberts could have been any role here. Maybe she could have played the one who's obsessed with scooters. You know, maybe she could have played the role that was performed by Gugu. But instead, we didn't get Emma Roberts. Instead, we're here today on Chet Approved Podcast to present Pictures Powwow Chet Edition, in which we talk about a movie that has come recommended. On this podcast, we recommend films to one another, and you, the listening people, also can provide films for us to cover. In fact, the movie that we'll be discussing next episode will be one from you, the listening people. So if you have a film that you're just itching, just scratching, just frothing to give to us, recommend it and we put it on the list. If you're lucky, you can bribe us and maybe we'll do a Paul Giamatti movie quicker than we usually do. But the circumstances and the price has to be right. Maybe if it has Chet in it. I don't know if Paul and Chet Hanks have ever crossed over. I have a feeling they haven't, but who knows? Have Tom Hanks and Paul Giamatti ever crossed over? I don't know. Maybe.
Ooh.
It feels like they should have, right?
Yeah.
It feels right. There's going to be someone banging their fist on the table going, how could you forget that Paul Giamatti was in, The Green Mile?
Sorry, I didn't hear that, Ryan. I think maybe my hearing will be better if I get a bit of a bribe.
Oh, here you go. Here's a little bit of dosh for you.
Oh, I remember nothing, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Your money has convinced me. This is an in-joke no one knows.
What in-joke? I'm just saying that people can recommend films to us, and I recommended the film today, and that is Larry Crowne, the Tom Hanks film. Not only does he star in it, he directed it and wrote it.
And he put Chet in it.
And he put Chet in it, and he put his wife in it, Rita Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
He also was brave enough to put Randall Park in there in a thankless role that's in one scene that starts the film.
If we get a video game adaptation of this, will Tom Hanks do it, or will he get Jim to do it?
Jim will do it.
Jim
will do the strenuous grunt sounds.
The motion capture?
The voice work. Robert Zemeckis will somehow still direct the game version, even though he's a film director. Now, we're doing Larry Crowne, and I recommended this. And if I have to tell the listening people out there what the film is about, it may seem too simple because it's a film that is very much of the past. It's a film with sensibilities that I just don't think we get a lot of these kind of mid-range joints anymore. It's a midlife crisis film in a lot of ways, but it's a story about Tom Hanks. He's just an average guy. He's working in retail. He gets kicked out of there because he doesn't have the right education to climb the ladder of success. And so he decides that he should find purpose in his life. And he enters into community college where he meets a whole cavalcade of kooky characters, a woman that could be for him, and a new purpose on life. It may sound very hokey when described like that. Like, why would you ever want to watch a movie with such basics of that? Maybe it sounds trite, a bit formulaic, and Bartek and we will have discussions on how we feel about it, but I still say watch Larry Crowne. Watch Larry Crowne. You get Tom Hanks being a charming fellow, but I think there's just such a, I guess, window back in time to films like this that used to be everywhere.
Yeah, when I walked into the film not really knowing much at all about it. I think it was only when I was checking to see like where I could find the film that I even saw like a synopsis for it and the poster for it. I'm like, oh, it's a Tom Hanks film. Oh, he directed it. Oh, it's a romantic comedy. Okay. And then as I was watching, we've had a string lately of doing, films that are over 2 hours long and, not necessarily with bad connotations, but are like weird or unusual in some way. They're not very conventional. So when I saw that this film was, it's under 2 hours long and it has a lot of very, kind of mainstreamy, conventional vibes to it, I was a bit, confused and in a way pleasantly surprised. Like, we're doing something different by doing something that's fairly normal.
This was my remedy to any questions for Ben, the film we covered last week, which was a film about a person having a quarter-life crisis and having inadequacies and inaction and unsure of themselves, and they're surrounded by a cavalcade of kooky characters that help motivate them or don't. And I said, I want to watch a film that I feel kind of goes down easier, has a likable lead, and if you have Tom Hanks, you're almost guaranteed satisfaction on terms of likability. So everyone make sure to give this film a watch because we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. And Bartek, you said your history with it in a way already, but is there anything else you want to expound upon when it comes to Larry Crowne in terms of coming into the film? You had no familiarity with this? There was nothing, when you're watching it, you were like, this is bringing a memory of some sort. Anything?
I remember last week when you recommended the film, you said that you distinctly knew I hadn't seen it before. So that told me you've mentioned it at least at some point, but I do not recall when.
You like, and I don't know if you like this film, but this is a film where it fits a certain mold of things that you talk about on the podcast as liking. And yet you haven't recommended too many of these films wholeheartedly on the podcast, but you always bring up that Simon Pegg film, the Hector.
Yeah, I used to bring that up quite a bit.
Was it Search for Happiness?
Yeah, I think so.
And it just was like, that reminds me of Larry Crowne. Obviously different, but like that vibe. Yeah, that type of movie. And I just noted down, you haven't seen Larry Crowne, and you also are a Tom Hanks fan. I mean, we've done Tom Hanks projects over the years. He's one in particular.
Yeah, he's a person that's hard not to be a fan of, I think.
He's Mr. Likeability. He's the Jimmy Stewart of the modern age. Now, I saw Larry Crowne back in the day. I don't know why. I don't know how. But just it's one of those films that I stumbled across in some way. And the history of it is vague, but I remembered overall enjoying it. I remembered it being a fun, fluffy time with some minor eccentric quirks to it. And for the sake of our podcast, I thought it would be interesting to talk about because it's almost like a mecca of actors that we've seen over the years on our podcast. There's just so many faces of people that we have delighted in on having having them show up in movies and supporting roles, and here they are doing the same thing again. Like Cedric the Entertainer is here playing like a hotshot no nonsense guy who's a bit of a wheeler and dealer, and I'm like, oh, I loved Intolerable Cruelty, so I'm glad to see him doing a character like that again, but different. And there's a few people like that in here where it's like, hey, look, it's this person again, and oh, look, it's this wonderful character actor. And that's kind of what's lingered with me, is that at the time of seeing it, this was nothing of specialness. It was just a Sunday afternoon film. But now, we go to the movies and stuff like The Holdovers, which you and I both saw in the movie cinema, is lauded for kind of harkening back to something that Larry Crowne was just doing in a time where every movie was just like, here's a likable, Paul Giamatti's different in Holdovers, but like that kind of film where it's just like, here we are just following some people around, kind of discovering what life is, and it's a mid-range movie.
It has some cynicism to it, but it doesn't go too far.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and you get an excuse to see some weirdos pop in and out of the feature. And so I recommended it for that, and that's been my history with it. And I must say that I had a lovely time last night. My wife watched it with me. She had a roller coaster of emotions, and she said very, very firmly, I would have loved this when it came out. But there's aspects of it that I hate right now. And I feel the same. There's aspects of this that really don't work, that is really corny, that feels haphazard and forced and hollow. And yet there's just kind of a nostalgia to this of being in delirium of, oh, this character's come in, they seem all right. Oh, 2-3 scenes of them, they're a fucking freak. And I love those type of things where you and I particularly revel in those characters. And this film just kept being like, you want another one? You want another one? I think the most recent example of our fascination with this was when we did the Nanny Diaries, and we had that the woman, the ditzy blonde one scene wonder who was like very much the
like trophy wife.
The trophy wife, and we're like, oh man, remember when movies would just cut to scenes with characters like this?
Yeah, we didn't talk about that character nearly enough.
We talked about her a good amount, but not enough. And this film has some of that flair to it. But what did you think of Larry Crowne? What were you expecting? What was the overall experience?
It's honestly very similar to what you were describing there, where at the end of the day, it was a pleasant time. Not my favorite film, certainly not a bad film. When I heard that it was a romantic comedy, in my head I was picturing something that didn't lean too far into the comedy side of things. And when I was seeing some of its comedic sensibilities, there were some things there that just were not working for me. I'm like, oh, no, not liking this. But the film didn't 100% make me feel that way. There were funny things in this film that I genuinely had great laughs at. So the comedy-wise, it was, like a take it or leave it, some hits, some misses kind of thing, where in the end, I'm happy at least for the hits. But yeah, there were a couple in a row, I think, at the beginning. I was like, oh, no, this is not what I want to be in for.
Let's talk about the romance aspect, because in my mind, that's what I remembered, because the poster is of the two leads on the scooter riding around, and they have that smile, and it's like how the credits of the movie end as well. And so in my brain, it kind of formulated this as much more of that classic rom-com affair that these actors were known for as well. Like, let's not forget that Tom Hanks used to be the big rom-com guy with like stuff like You've Got Mail and like Meg Ryan and Julia Roberts and Tom Hanks and Billy Crystal, and like we could keep listing a bunch of them. And Tom Hanks has obviously done so much in his career that you wouldn't just define him by that, but he had that era. He had that era of his career, and so this wouldn't be out of the ballpark. But what I was just completely dumbfounded by, and I don't know if you agree, is how disinterested this film is with the central romance. And that was a big negative to me, because a part of me was like, either do it or don't.
Yeah, in the end, when they got together, I almost felt like I didn't want that to happen because the film wasn't. Because of the type of film it is, it was obviously leading to that, but the journey that it put me on, I didn't necessarily want to see it happen.
It was a romance out of obligation.
Yeah.
This is not a romantic comedy. This is a comedy film, midlife crisis / coming of age, if you want, film with a romantic part. But it's not interested in it. It's there out of the sheer sense of what you just said of a film like this has to lead to this eventually, and that's what it's very very mechanical and checklisty in that sense. It doesn't, like Tom Hanks, who wrote this, directed it, and acts in it, it just doesn't feel like he is invested in that at all. And that's not to say him and Julia Roberts don't have chemistry, but they had more chemistry as like misfit friends than they did as actual people tenderly falling in love later in life.
Yeah, they're two people who are, unhappy with the present states of their lives. They meet through this, weird circumstance where they, have to have, interactions with each other and a group of others. And their relationship throughout all of the film develops based on those circumstances, not the circumstances of them, falling in love with each other. Certainly they get closer to each other and might be developing feelings, but yeah, the film's really not, focusing on like, I want to get with this person.
He spends more time with his classmates and their friends and growing bonds with people beyond his own age bracket or beyond his own class or race or gender than he does actually forming a legitimate romantic entanglement with this teacher who's also a married woman. Because that's a film in itself. Like, if you say Larry Crowne, you could describe it as a film about a man who falls in love with his teacher who is a married woman. And if you say that, that's factually what this film is about, but it's misleading.
It's a fact because that's how it ends up. Not
Yes.
because that's what it is for most of it.
But at the same time, what you said at the beginning is also apt, which is, although that's where it ends up, it's clear that's what this is about. Like, that's clear what this is all going towards. So it is a running thing throughout the movie, but it's so muted in comparison to what is honestly just Tom Hanks wanting to have a fun time. And, well, in a movie, you got to have a romance. You got to have the guy and the girl on the cover. And we've discussed this over the years. And, bring it back up again. The Nanny Diaries was a fair example of that. Was my criticism of it, where that film had two young, hot people, and the film insisted that there needed to be a deeper romance here, but it also didn't seem interested in telling a romance story.
Oh, right, yeah, that was the one with Chris Evans, right?
Yes, Chris Evans, Scarlett Johansson, The Nanny Diaries, but it seemed like it was more interested in the story about like a young woman finding herself in a lot of trouble because of lies and so on. But you see what I mean there? Like, we've covered this over the years where romance is very much something that is a given in stories, but when it is actually put in, it can be elevating material that's already great. Like, I'll bring it up again, but like Intolerable Cruelty, with George Clooney and Catherine Zeta-Jones, that's a romantic comedy where, they have a flirtation going on. They're also playing cat and mouse. They're also adversaries, but damn, is it so much fun to watch them, in spite of everything, fall in love. Well, in this film, you just know it's going to happen, so you just let it happen.
It's falling to the expected tropes or the circumstance of the time. Like, I'm thinking of examples in the past that are very different films, but the two that I think of are, when we covered the film Michael, there was a romance in that film between the guy and a girl. I forget the exact circumstances of the film, but I think he was keeping a secret from her. And they had a scene, before the inevitable third act breakup where they've straight up said, like, even if there is something like this, we will not have a third act breakup. Mm-hmm. And then the film went and had a third act breakup. And I was like, oh, come on. You had to fall to that. And the other one was when we covered Bus Stop, where it was like, oh, there's all these signs leading up to like, oh, this relationship is not going to work. This is a relationship that shouldn't happen. They should get away from each other. but because it was made in the 50s and there were, Hollywood standards they had to meet, you know that they're going to get together in the end.
There was almost an exciting level to this romance because of one dicey choice that thankfully Tom Hanks was wise enough to step away from. But in a way, this tumultuous scene was the most fascinating because it was like edge of the seat, which is when they kiss. Because she's drunk. She even says, I'm half in the bag, you can take advantage of me and it'll be fine. And there's that part of you that goes, no, obviously don't do that. That's wrong. The power dynamics and consent is out the window because they're inebriated and he is not. But in a weird way, not knowing if the film knew that was good or bad was exciting because everything about the romance was played so down the middle that in a weird way, that kind of bus stop mentality of the Marilyn Monroe film was a bit of flavoring in this. I was like, ooh. And I was like on the edge of my seat wondering, does Tom Hanks know that if he makes his main character get with this girl in this moment, that it would be inherently unlikable?
And it was interesting because the way he was playing it before the kiss happened was he was speechless, and I was expecting the next thing to come out of his mouth, but miss, you're drunk. That wouldn't be right or something. So when they actually did start kissing, I was like, oh, okay.
But then he stopped and he did the right thing and he walked out, and then he had to do his little dance outside. And that whole thing, the dance outside, is so fucking weird on like a moral level that it's the most intriguing, fascinating, discussing, like the thing we can discuss the most about their romance, because everything else about it is paint by numbers, trite, hollow, empty. It just, you have to go through the motions. Well, you've seen that in movies before too, but with the construction of the Larry Crowne character and the Tom Hanks persona, there's a level of danger to it of like, don't do this, Tom. But at the same time, fucking do something. Yeah, do something, man.
And then like a scene or two later, you have their next confrontation where she talks about like, please forget about everything there. I was drunk and I wasn't in the right state of mind. It's like, yeah. We, the audience, knew that, and it's good that the film recognizes that too.
What did you think about Bryan Cranston as her husband?
No, he's just a really hardworking guy.
He's just a guy. I
think he said the famous words.
I'm just a guy.
He had a 3-part to it, wasn't it? Like, I'm just a guy wanting to being a guy
who's
doing guy things or something.
And we were just cheering you and I.
It was very funny.
It was very amusing. Bryan Cranston is a legend. We all know him from something. And it was Godzilla. Well,
it's not a joke.
You and I have venom towards that movie, but we loved him in that movie, and it was the reason we saw it, because like, oh, Bryan Cranston's good.
I saw it with friends, but the fact that he was there made it for me.
Yeah, you were like hooked. You're like, oh, okay, Bryan Cranston's here, and then they fucked you.
I didn't even watch Breaking Bad. I just like his performance.
Yeah, but that's me. Like, he's good, and he's good in this movie in a role that I usually hate. I usually hate we've got to set up the shitty partner so it justifies.
This film.
Yes, I'm talking about Larry Crowne. In this film, he plays a character that I usually loathe, which is we have to set up that the love interest as a shitty partner that's so awful that you have to justify why she would cheat on their significant other with our main character. It's something you see often appear. I loathe it because I think it's just so icky some of the time. Like, sometimes I don't care, sometimes it works, but there are other times where I just get pissed off at like how manipulative scripts can be with that. Like, Bryan Cranston's character has to be such an overt asshole so that way you don't feel iffy at all about Julia Roberts and Tom Hanks falling in love.
Yeah, when I said earlier there were some things in this film that weren't working for me, it was a lot of the times when it would really beat you over the head with certain things. And a lot of the comedy, especially early on, was very much in that vein. And this character also, his personality is kind of beating you over the head, but it somehow didn't bother me as much.
Bryan Cranston, he did this special thing that the script is not bringing, which is, I said to my wife, I know that he's a bad person, but I believe him. Like, when he was trying to like do that thing in couples argue, like when couples are arguing and he's like, you win. And, or even before we got to that big blow up scene, even in their other scenes, like how he's trying to communicate his feelings, and it's obviously manipulative, but Bryan Cranston's bringing an authenticity to it that I can't help but be like, hey, he's reaching out, he's trying, but he's clearly a piece of shit still.
Yeah.
And I think it's that level of that extra step in the performance that makes it feel less beating over the head than it already is.
Yeah, to be more specific about it, like the scene where Larry Kudlow is...
Larry Kudlow?
That's the guy of the Trump administration. I kept making that mistake.
Larry Crowne.
Larry Crowne.
Fuck, man.
There were a lot of jokes about him in the past, so it kept coming to
I've
my
never
head.
heard of Larry Kudlow.
He was some Trump guy, I don't know.
All right.
The scene where Larry Crowne gets fired, that's a scene very early on where it was beating over the head with the comic relief characters during this, serious and tense scene that's developing our character and introducing the conflict. Like the guy with, the university ring who is constantly quipping about like, oh, hey, isn't it great that I got promoted over you? Hey, you want the last slice of pizza? That kind of thing. That was irritating to me. And it was, it's very blunt because I can just see this like, written character, dumbass comic guy, comedy guy,
Yes.
spouting all these lines when I'm just don't want to hear it.
And they're acting against Tom Hanks.
And they're acting against Tom Hanks, who, putting aside his prestigiousness, his prolificness, he's playing this for drama.
Yes, he's not playing it for laughs. When he says, I thought I was going to be Employee of the Month, it was heartbreaking. It's genuinely upsetting.
Yeah.
But then he's playing up against the usual players of silliness. I actually really liked in that scene his already existing manager.
Yeah, the old guy.
Yeah, he didn't feel like he was playing it up for laughs. He felt like he was in the same movie Tom Hanks
No,
was.
yeah, he was playing it very diplomatically.
Yeah, he was good. Well, now we're going into the comedy aspects of it. For myself, I didn't mind the earlier parts as much. Maybe because I liked a lot of those characters. So very early on, we get the setup there of, they're making him redundant. They're chucking him out because he doesn't have a higher education, which is a stupid reason to fire someone in retail. I can tell you that for sure.
Yeah.
Especially in a retail environment in which you can just do like what he does, coursework while you're working to get some bullshit degree that can make you blah, blah, blah. But they obviously are doing their corporate business shit. And what I appreciated about that scene is they are stripping away through their overtly silly portrayals. They are stripping away any of those deeper nuances of what is happening in the corporate system there, because I work in retail, my mother works in retail, and if you get to a certain position and you stay there for a while, you either get pushed up the ladder or they try and push you out in general, and that's what happens here. Like they discuss it, but what I'm getting at is I really liked how buffoonish it was, because then when another comedic character comes in, Cedric the Entertainer's character, he lays it all out, plain as day. He goes through the minutiae of what went wrong and what they're actually doing, and they're trying to make you not realize that that's what they're doing. But he's a comedic character saying it through his way. But I was just nodding going, Cedric's right. Everything he said was correct.
Mm-hmm.
And I really thought that the kind of juxtaposition of front-loading you with these boobs at the retail store to then have another comedic character who is not a boob, he's a far more nuanced character, actually say, no, Larry, they were playing you, Larry. That's what they were doing. Like, they did it on Friday, right? That's how
they always do it on Friday.
They always do it on Friday, and they do this and they do that. And I was just nodding along going, man, I fucking love this. And so the first part of the film, I was a bit more warm to, and also just, I love Cedric the Entertainer. What can I say? I've always enjoyed him in a film.
No, he was fun. I had no problems with him.
And his wife, played by, I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, that's Taraji P. Henson, who's in like a bunch of stuff as well. And I think we've had her on the podcast. Yes, Taraji P. Henson, who, she's in Hidden Figures and she's in like a whole slew of things, Benjamin Button and stuff. Like she's one of those, she's in a bunch of comedy drama. She does a Tyler Perry film or two. There's actually one on the list I've been meaning to do for a while where she plays in the erotic thriller genre of Tyler Perry, which is the best genre of Tyler Perry.
We haven't had one in a while.
But so the comedy that left me a bit wanting was more in the middle section, in which Larry gets embroiled in the scooter gang, and Gugu, that's the name of the actress, Gugu Mbatha Raw, who's a fantastic actress. I recommend checking out a lot of her films, specifically Belle. I don't usually see her play comedy, so that's kind of a difference. But when she started to really invade Larry's life, I was deeply uncomfortable, but then it worked out in the end, because I was worried that they were going to do that thing where the young, free-spirited people kind of fuck over Larry's life because they think they know how to improve it. Specifically the scene in which they give him a haircut, and they're going to be like, we're going to fix up your room and give it feng shui. I legitimately was yelling at the screen because I thought, because you've seen this in films, I thought they were going to throw his stuff away and or sell all of his records and stuff, because they set that up in the movie. But instead, they legitimately just reorganized his lounge room, and they didn't throw any of his stuff away. They just reorganized it. And I was like, whoa. But I was so on edge in this middle part of the movie, because a lot of her comedy and a lot of the comedy around that I've seen be done in a drastically bad way in other comedy films or in other dramas. And so I was just kind of gritting my teeth through a lot of her free-spiritedness, or the Julia Roberts character being jealous of Gugu for being this young, hot thing, and it makes it look like Tom Hanks is just attending the school to be a predator, but then the film's like, nah, we're moving past that. So for me, the middle part is where some of the comedy was really dicey.
So just to be clear, the whole thing about with that crew, were you worried that the film was going to fail to do what it wanted with them, or that you were worried that they were going to do something bad?
I was worried that they were going to do something bad, but the film was going to say it was good.
Right.
Because I've seen so many times in dramas and in comedies that type of thing where it's like, we've given you a makeover.
They've done something that you disagree with, but the film says that they're right.
Yes. Like, I was genuinely worried that they were going to sell his records or take his records and be like, ew, and throw them away. And then he will have to learn, you can't be clinging to the past, because that was a part of the thing that they were trying to hammer in.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
But instead, they just gave him a normal Tom Hanks haircut, told him he doesn't need to tuck in his shirt all the time, and that was it.
No, I just saw them as like, that's a manic pixie dream team, mostly managed by this one girl, and it's a non-romantic thing.
Oh yeah.
So I knew the film was going to be on their side, but I didn't think they would like cross any big line. I think they did actually have a line where it's like, we're just going to rearrange some stuff, throw something out. And he's like, oh, well, don't throw out too much or something. And I thought like, okay.
But that usually in a comedy, especially with your manic pixie types, what their version of too much is very different to the main characters.
Yeah, they're very spacey.
But we're talking about elements that maybe didn't land for us, but what did work? Tell me some of the things that you enjoyed about the films, things that leapt out, standouts.
A lot of the characters at the community college were really good. When we were first introduced to the class, they were obviously, like blank slates, like, okay, they're 9 people filling out the room. And I thought we would get very little of them. We actually got a fair bit of them, and we actually saw a kind of developing relationship for the group. And I really liked that the film focused on that.
It's always fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
That kind of weird found family of weird misfits, most of whom don't want to be there, but by the end, they do like being there because they get to be with each other. They learn more about themselves and one another through the class. It's a staple, but it works.
No, and it was really fun. And obviously the other class he has an interesting teacher.
We'll get to him. What did you think about future Oscar-winning actor Rami Malek, a.k.a. Freddie Mercury, as the stoner of the group?
The dummy.
He was good.
He was funny, yeah. Again, when he was first introduced, it's like, he's the comic relief character of this scene. Mm-hmm. But no, they kept him. They used him a little bit. They kind of developed on his sort of, quirks and eccentricities, and the speech that he gives in the end, even though he only got like a C plus, I was like, oh, but that's he passed. He actually, did the assignment. I thought he would get a bit of a higher mark, but that's fine.
I thought everyone's speech was better than Tom Hanks' speech. I thought that speech sucked. Like his geography speech, I didn't think it was very good. I thought it was like, it's fine. Like if I was actually marking,
I think it was,
There's a lot of, I went to this place and I saw this. And that was...
Well, he was tying it to everyone else's speeches.
Yes, I know. I really like the... There's a joke I really liked where one of the guys got up there and their speech was basically the community college scene of Moe from The Simpsons teaching you how to make them back off from the fly girl.
The five dances every man should know.
Yes, because this movie's basically that episode of The Simpsons where Homer goes back to like community college, and he's like, grandpa's teaching you how to eat an orange or whatever it is. Not grandpa, like the paddling and all that. Lenny, and there's the old guy who's like, no, that's a paddling. All of those. It reminded me of that, and Moe's teaching you the dance moves to make you back off your fly girl. But I liked the dance thing, and what I liked about it was, one, the guy was legitimately good. Two, the teacher, Julia Roberts, she was clearly annoyed, but you could see she was admiring it. That was the part that got me. It was all in the facial expressions, but you could see she's just like, another, here we go again, another piece of bullshit. Get through, time's up. But you could see there was a twinkle in her eye of like, it's pretty good. And I love that type of humor, these absurdities of like, you see this obviously stupid thing going on, and the straight-laced character can't help but be like won over a little bit, even if it's just by a smidge. I love that.
No, and I liked how the whole class and all the assignments are kind of introduced as things that are making them go outside of their comfort zone, and like just straight instruction to do this thing that's kind of uncomfortable, like go up in front of the class and talk about this for 2 minutes or something. It's like, what topics will you pick? And you can see, in like a different kind of comedy, you might have a scene like, way back when we did Band Slam, and we had like the group assignment where it's like, do an assignment on your partner, and we had that one scene where it's like, who is Eric? He is a mystery and an enigma, and it's just some nerdy kid who's just sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
You could see it being like, reaching for the bottom of the barrel. And I liked how, with choices like, dance moves, it's like, yeah, that is, an interesting thing to think about. And it's, the dances were genuine moves.
I can tell you as a Trekkie, the guy's
it was the same guy, right?
Yeah, the guy's speech about Star Trek was a legitimately good speech. And then obviously she interrupts it because she's not a Trekkie. But I'm like, this is actually a well-written speech. There was a laugh had, because I'm a nerd. It's my time to shine. He gave a speech about how his favorite character is Captain Sisko from Deep Space Nine, who's the black captain, the first ever African-American lead of Star Trek. And he talked about how Deep Space Nine is severely underrated and all of that. But he himself was wearing a Voyager uniform. Just have to put that out there. Now, people, you can argue he's wearing early season 1, early season 2, Deep Space Nine, but he was clearly talking about the later parts of Deep Space Nine, so he should be wearing a different uniform.
When he was interrupted, wasn't he in the middle of talking about what he was wearing?
Yes, he was explaining the rank. So the different colors have different things. So he's wearing science / medical.
He was talking about that's what he would study if he was in the
science
academy.
or medical is what the blue is, but the uniform is a Voyager era uniform.
Sure.
I noticed Tom Hanks.
This is like
you should have hired me. I would have told you to get the DS9 uniforms, where their ones they have a gray top and the neck is the color. That's the difference.
This is like when the Captain Kirk guy noticed that Mike Stoklasov was wearing the wrong uniform in that one Red Letter Media video.
Now, talking about Star Trek.
Yeah, fun fact. That guy was talking about Star Trek. The teacher in the other class was actually in Star Trek. Did you know that?
Yes, he was. Now, I love George. George is a fun actor. George Takei. He's got a great voice. And I've been saying at least that this film is filled to the brim with those, it's that person actors. And Tom Hanks, who directs and writes this, I don't know if he specifically had George in mind, but it felt like he did, because I think not only that character, but that actor was the best utilized in terms of like comedy. Like Tom Hanks would play around with camera angles a lot with him to emphasize jokes. It's not just George has a funny voice.
The tag team of George Takei and a low-angle camera shot was the best part of the film.
My biggest laugh, and again, this is because the technicals, is you know for a fact George Takei is going to take his phone. This is already established. But the humor I had of hearing this on my surround sound, of hearing the voice of George Takei give the lecture, slowly moving closer and closer until eventually he gets into the side of the frame and his hand leans down. I loved it because you knew already where it was going. But then if you're listening and you've got a good sound system, the film is rewarding you on an extra technical level.
Do not watch this film in mono.
No, that's exactly it. I like, again, they go to, I feel, I'll pass it over to you, but I really feel like the script, the direction, the technicals, all of that, when it came to the comedy, went the hardest and out of the way the most with the George Takei scenes.
Yeah, and it's like we were saying with the low angle camera, it's not just the acting. It's like there's so many elements in those scenes where it's like, the class he has with Julia Roberts, where she's the teacher, is in this, like kind of warm colored room. It's small, it's kind of intimate, whereas his is in a full on, lecture hall, lecture theater.
Very fluorescent in its lighting.
With like, the layered levels of seating and desks, and it's, white kind of almost sterile room, and he's at the front, and, you have all those camera angles, and he speaks in that clear voice. And he, says things that are meant to be cues for a reaction, and he points out in his, very clear but stilted way, like, most of people, run away at this point, so you guys are very
evilly
brave.
Laughed.
When he just keeps going back to the evil laugh, and eventually he does get to a point where they do laugh.
And that his whole entire gimmick is he's not teaching them about business, he's only teaching them about his book. Just his book. And the contrast of teaching methods, because he is arguably more of an engaged teacher than Julia Roberts' character is, because she's all, I don't give a fuck about this. She's looking for an excuse not to teach. She's drunk. But when she gets in her mojo, she's far more welcoming. She gets them up and she gets them talking to each other, while his is very cold. Very much only he is allowed to be the one in charge, and no one else is allowed to engage unless he physically points to them and demands that they do something. And even then, Tom Hanks pulls it out of his ass, and it's just correct. And he's like, "Oh, you've been studying up on my book, I see."
Well, no, it's a running thing of like, he's, a different sort of not good teacher, where he's, focused on himself and his book, and it's just, it's a thing you hear about in a lot of media about school, where it's like, oh yeah, the teacher was just wanted to sell their book to us or whatever, and they were playing with that there. But then Tom Hanks was a genuinely good student to him. Like, he read the book, he knew the answers, and even though there was that running thing about like Tom Hanks is on his phone, so he has to keep taking it. It's like, well, this is still your best student.
And they always kept updating the phone gag to the point in which by the end, his entire table is filled with all of the phones, because now he's made it a blanket rule that everyone must put their phone in.
Yes, exactly.
And Tom Hanks is like begrudgingly having to do it. And I love that. Like, they kept updating it, kept refreshing it, kept bringing it to a new level. And I can't remember the exact line, but they just gave George the best like zingers and just like, ooh, that's a good line, such as the whole, and it's the voice helps. George has a recognizable voice. The face is iconic as well, but just him being like, they call them smartphones, but you're awfully dumb to bring them to my class, and just stuff like that. I just was like, constantly, I this is no exaggeration, I would fist pump when he would peer, because I'm like, yes, because I keep saying they know how to use him, because George Takei, he's an iconic actor. He's from Star Trek. He has a voice that you can never not hear. He has he looks, has a specific look, and sometimes projects just bank on like, oh, that's enough. No, it's not just enough to just be like, well, we got George in, so that's enough. Like, I always think of the third Command and Conquer Red Alert game, and how he's the emperor of China or what, of Japan or whatever. And it's just like, just let him ham it up, whatever. You need to hone it in and do something specific with him, or else it's just kind of nothing. And this film, which, isn't the deepest, isn't a comedic masterpiece, they really were like, no, we've got to use George appropriately. And I was just so thankful that they did.
No, I agree. He was the highlight of the film.
What else worked for you? What were other things that you got out of this?
Let's see. We already brought up Cedric the Entertainer, how, he's a comedy character that does have his, gimmicks and quirks, and the film goes full on with them, but they still have, like, the emotional core to him. It was really nice seeing, all of the ways that he would still be a warm character while keeping to his, sort of attitude and obsessions with his yard sale and haggling. Like, the scene where he said goodbye to Tom Hanks was genuinely heartwarming.
It was, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, they're just the... Do you think we need movies like this anymore? We had them for decades, and now they're not as prevalent. Are you thinking that there's this conversation in general in film of, like, we need to bring back these type of movies? We've had it over the years, but what do you think? After seeing one like this, do you feel like we're really lacking on these when there's such a huge back catalogue?
In a sort of separate but kind of related topic, I've been hearing a lot lately that, with people's tastes changing over time, we've kind of gone full circle in what people seem to want. So I remember, around the time we were born, just before, in the decades prior, like, we had a lot of wholesome media. And as it went on, we started getting a bit more like cynicism and, darkness.
Dark, gritty, yeah.
Yeah, like in video games, for example, like, a lot of things changed when GTA 3 came out. Things started to become more violent, more cynical, and, even that franchise has developed over time to just go more in that direction. But I've been hearing lately that a lot of the younger generation seem to gravitate less towards that and, things of sexual nature, and do seem to want more wholesome things.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe with, the general tastes changing, maybe, softer films like this will start to become more desired and, might have a revival.
Yeah, I definitely have heard that be a conversation point. I just feel like with now how media analysis is, media literacy, there's a greater discussion about, or like emphasis on time. Of like, well, why would I waste my time on something frivolous like Larry Crowne when I could be watching a great Tom Hanks film like Shawshank Redemption or The Green Mile or even the Toy Story films? Like, I feel like that's also been something that's withheld a lot of these types of movies where it's like, no, films that star someone like Tom Hanks, they should be in something important like a MCU movie or this or this or this or this, rather than a 90-minute piece of fluff.
Was he in The Shawshank Redemption?
No, I'm just using examples of big films. No, sorry, he was in The Green Mile, and he was in another... Was he in another Frank Darabont film? No, but, like, these big heralded films of, like, time. Like, I should watch other Tom Hanks movies, such as your favorite Tom Hanks movie. Come on.
Castaway?
Castaway.
Yeah.
Where I should be watching that rather than, him being Larry Crowne.
Something that when it came out was very middle of the road, I suppose.
Yes. And I think that's fair. I go through that too, where I say, why should I watch this piece of, like, junk entertainment when I could be watching a masterpiece or a heralded work of art that I haven't consumed before?
Should we be using our old words? The
unappreciated masterpieces?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why? And we always go back to that. Like, in a weird way, a lot of my affection for some of these actors, directors, writers have come from those things. Like, when we grew up, Robert De Niro, for instance, did the Meet the Parents films. They're not high art, but they were an entry point for a lot of people our age as like, oh, here's the great Robert De Niro and he's being fun and lighthearted. Not all of us were born from the womb and immediately watched Godfather 2 or, so on.
Yeah,
Or,
Taxi Driver, Scorsese films.
or like, look at Joe Pesci. For most people, after a certain age bracket, you in particular as well, he's the guy from Home Alone. Like, he's the...
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Well, for everyone who's like, it's Joe Pesci, he's Goodfellas and Casino and Scorsese, all that. But it's like, no, for many people, he's in a successful film, but it's like a kid's film. And we talk about it, but we love Paul Giamatti, and we love that era of Paul Giamatti where he was just going, fuck it. I'll be in Big Fat Liar, Thunderpants, and Big Mama's House one after the other. Like, fuck it. And also Sideways, and also Cinderella Man. Like, two of the most acclaimed films of his entire career. All in that span. He was also like, fuck it, I'm just going to have fun and do Thunderpants. I like Thunderpants because he's having so much fun in it.
No, I've seen a lot more of those types of films than him in, more serious roles.
Yes, but is there anything else you want to say about Larry Crowne?
We've brought up the bike gang, but we haven't talked about Fez.
What do you want to say about Fez?
Returning actor from when he was in a photo in Zoom.
Now he's actually in the movie.
Now he's moving and talking.
How did you feel about that? Were you moved to tears?
It was nice seeing him move and talk. But he was also another one where the film kind of did the film know what they were doing with him or not? I'm not sure.
What were they doing with him?
Yeah, they introduced him as he's like kind of the leader or the guy leader of the group.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts off with a whole like, oh, you gotta kind of conform to us. It's like, nah, yeah, okay, we're just kidding. You're in the group. And then they had a lot of tension with, and this is kind of mirroring Julia Roberts' side of him not liking that his girlfriend was getting close to Tom Hanks.
Yes.
And it felt like it was leading up to something, but in the end, it just ended up being a running joke.
Yes, because he's a doofus. Now, will you be upset if I inform you that that's not Fez from that 70s show?
No, that was when I read Wilmer Vanderama in the credits. That wasn't him.
Was that him? Oh wait, yes, you're correct. I was thinking of another character in their gang.
I saw his name in the credits. I'm like, oh, Fez is in this.
I always forget that he's a handsome guy in other things.
Well, he's a cute doofus in that 70s show.
Yeah, no, he was okay. I didn't have a problem with him. I didn't mind that gag. I
just didn't know it was a gag.
Oh, really?
I thought it was there's going to be some sort of, conclusion point to this recurring notion.
No. How did you feel about the ending of this film? Where Larry's kind of like, yeah, man, I'm just working life. I've moved out of that place. I had to move out. I left everything behind. I'm kind of going to the community college, kind of like, and then they just meet up and embrace. What do you feel about the ending of Larry Crowne? Because it kind of just ends.
Yeah, I guess it does. I mean, he's done with the community college, so...
He did the one unit.
Yeah.
And that was it.
That's it. Well, I mean, he did that and the
business.
George Takei.
Yeah, he did the one bit, and that was it.
Didn't the dean early on say, like, oh, yeah, you just need to do this and this and you're fine?
Yeah. Yeah, it was...
I guess it was set up.
What was with that character, the dean? Was he a pervert or not? Because he was confusing. I thought at first he was a pervert because he's like, yeah, I'm the teacher, but then never again was like that. He seemed genuinely like, I really like this class. He didn't seem pervy.
It seemed to be a weird thing where, in the end he was fine, but it seemed like they were doing a bit of a shift thing where, like, early on, as you said, he was a little bit, suspicious. His attitude, pervy, as you say. And he would come into the class at one point and see, like, it's not going that well, but he'd be enthusiastic about it. And then later on in the film where Julia Roberts is, much more energetic and, like, she's got everyone, they're doing, like, the, vocal exercises and stuff. The dean comes in and he's, like, looking a little bit concerned or confused, like, well, what's going on? So it's like, oh, so when it's not going well, you're kind of enthusiastic, but when it is going well, you're confused. Like, what's kind of happening with this character?
And the film gets a thumbs down from me because they got Pam Grier and they gave her nothing to do. They gave Pam Grier nothing to do. Did you even know Pam Grier was in this movie? The Jackie Brown herself?
You know what? I read her name in the credits. I'm like, oh, that name's familiar. We've seen her in something, but I forgot who she was. And only just now when you said her name, like, oh, Jackie Brown.
Yeah, who was she in the movie? Do you know?
Was she the other teacher that she was friends with?
Yeah. Yep. They gave her nothing to do.
See, I saw Wilmer Vanderarmen's name in the credits. I'm like, I know who that is, and I spotted him immediately. But I see Pam Grier.
Pam Grier. The amazing Pam Grier. They gave her absolutely zero to do. Why did you put her in here then? Honestly, she's a legend. I mean, she already did Jackie Brown by this point, but even before Jackie Brown, you put her in your film, you give her something to do. We haven't covered it on the pod, but there's the film Jawbreaker that I like very much, and she plays like the cop that's investigating the stuff, and maybe they don't give her as much to do, but they use Pam Grier. They're like, we got Pam Grier to do something. I guess
that's just another example of the film, filling the trope of like, oh, the cynical friend or the main lead girl needs to have a friend that she talks to sometimes. That's a staple of these films. She's going to be witty or something. But
now, the big final point I want to bring up, unless there's anything else you want to.
No, talk about Chet.
Well, it is related. Is this film just a vanity project for Tom Hanks? He wrote it, directs it, stars in it, and it's this corny, dopey Tom Hanksian tale about life, apparently based on a real friend of his as well. What do you think?
I guess with me, I would associate vanity projects being a bit more, I guess, like smug. And I don't know that this is a film that I would point to and say like, yeah, that's a smug film. So the vibe-wise, no, but maybe objectively there could be an argument to be made.
Thank you, because I was thinking the same. Do we feel like that because Tom Hanks is such a nice dude? We all just look at him and say, he seems nice. So if he does a film like this, which is, in my eyes, a vanity project, like, this is so, like, his wife's in it, his son's in it. Like, it's a whole family joint.
I did joke right at the start of this that he made a film for his son.
This is a Chet-approved podcast. A bunch of actors he likes are in it, and it's a film about how he is just the coolest, nicest dude ever, who can get down with the youth, and women just adore him, and he's just so cool. Like, but also, feel for him, because he's just like you, a guy struggling to get by. Like, I can see very much a case being made about how this film can be insufferable because there is that element of, like, insert character here, like Tom Hanks's dream version of things, and it's very syrupy and it's very sanitized. But it is a problem to separate the fact that Tom Hanks is, in our eyes and in most people's eyes, he's just so wholesome, where I go, yeah, but I just don't care. Because Tom Hanks seems like a wholesome person.
There is that joke that, like, Tom Hanks is so beloved that if you see him punching a nun, they'll ask, what did that nun do to Tom Hanks?
There was a whole podcast dedicated to Tom Hanks. It was called Dead Eyes. I've talked about it before.
Yes, you have.
In which an actor lost a role in Band of Brothers because apparently Tom Hanks said he had dead eyes. And then it's a whole entire journey to try and talk to Tom Hanks to find out about that moment. But really, it's like this interesting character study of Tom Hanks and the legacy of Tom Hanks and the persona of Tom Hanks and just the overall magic of film and how a person like him can have a persona and reputation. He is a Hollywood star. And there is that conversation that in a lot of ways we're losing the leading man Hollywood star type that Tom Hanks and Brad Pitt and, even with women, Julia Roberts and all of them would take up. That's kind of fading away now for some people. Now we have Tom Hardy. Okay.
He's Hardy.
He's got a silly accent in this film. But I just wanted to bring it up because is it not fair to say that this is just a thing for him to do to satisfy himself? Of like, he wrote it, directed it, stars in it, and it's a film about how wonderful he is.
I suppose, but while watching it, I kind of forgot that he directed it because he's just played so many characters like this, I guess.
Yeah.
Or I've seen this performance from him so many times. It's like, oh, okay, he's just directing it now.
Yeah, yeah. He doesn't try to make himself a badass. It's not like he's doing kung fu punches, and he's not saying, I'm fed up with this world.
I was literally thinking of Tommy Wiseau this whole time, of like everyone just like being like, he's my best friend.
But isn't this what Tommy wants?
He's a different Tom.
Yeah, but isn't this what Tommy Wiseau ideally would have wanted?
Probably, yeah.
With more of a tragedy element, but like, isn't this ideally what he would have wanted? But
in an alternate world where if the room was based on a real thing that happened to him, this is what he wanted to have actually happened to him.
I recommend Larry Crowne. It's not a perfect film. It's throwaway. It doesn't all hold together, but it's just a good time. It's one of those things in which it's maybe for your grandparents more than it is you, but I don't know. I kind of miss when the entertainment industry was just about entertainment too, rather than like, when I watch this film, I'm not sweating about like, oh my God, the corporate agenda behind it. I'm just like, oh, Tom Hanks wanted to have a fun time and he made a film where him and Julia Roberts kissed.
I think I did read in the trivia that the beginning part of it was at least, a statement against Kmart for their practices. Hence, he was working at U-Mart.
Yeah, oh yeah, of course.
So it is a political film.
It is a deeply political film.
With Chet Hanks in it.
With Chet, who's a deeply political person. Chet? Deeply.
What else has Chet Hanks been in?
Chet Hanks, well, he's been in a lot of things in life.
That's a good enough answer. Don't expand. No, that wasn't sarcasm. Like, don't actually expand.
I'm contracting. But do you recommend Larry Crowne?
I do recommend the film. When I was watching it last night, when I did realize that this was kind of like a, sort of middle of the road film, I'm like, well, why did he recommend this? But now having talked about it, it's like, yeah, we don't really see anything like this anymore.
Is this a film you and your mother would have seen in the cinema and had a pleasant time with?
I don't know that if we would have seen it in the cinema, but if we did watch it together, yeah, I think we'd have a decent enough time.
It's no Lucy.
It's no
That's
Lucy.
what you would see in the cinema.
There's not enough science.
He doesn't become a USB at the end, which would have really improved the film, Larry Crowne. He should have become a crown, a literal crown at the end. But like a tooth crown, not a crown of
Instead,
thorns.
in real life, he got the crown.
So, it is time for the listening people's recommendation.
I'm talking about coronavirus.
And did you know the listening people have picked films for us? So many. We have a big list now, but people make sure to add more because there's always a variety to pick from, but we always like more. And I mentioned their name a bunch. I even mentioned one of the actors in this film too. We're doing a Coen Brothers. We're returning to those guys.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned, I mentioned Intolerable Cruelty, and I mentioned Brad Pitt. We're going to do Burn After Reading, which was recommended to us on our YouTube in a comment. It was recommended by, I think you wrote their name down as an Honest Doubter, which is a fun name. I love that as a name. But Burn After Reading, very interesting movie. Everyone make sure to watch it. This is one of the Coen Brothers dark comedy films.
Mm-hmm.
So have that in mind. Don't think you're going in for No Country for Old Men. Think more you're going for...
the scene of this film where he got fired.
Yeah. It's an interesting little film. So I can't wait to talk about Burn After Reading. I've seen it before. I imagine you probably have not.
No, I haven't.
So everyone, make sure to tune in to hear the clash of history, a clash of opinions, or maybe we'll both agree. Who knows? Burn After Reading. Bartek, where can people find our podcast, the Chet-approved podcast?
You can find us on Spit and Polish Presents. That's the name of our show. You can definitely find us there. But I meant that if you're on the internet, you can look up those words, Spit and Polish Presents, and you'll probably find us. Probably on websites such as Facebook, X.com, YouTube. Those are the main ones, but there's other sites that our episodes get uploaded to.
Oh yeah, all of those podcast hosting sites we are on. and you can leave ratings and reviews on whichever ones are applicable.
Yeah, as we've said in this episode, we see the comments written on YouTube. They can be recommendations for us. We've been getting some messages on our Facebook page lately, people chatting to us and recommending films to us. That's another valid one. And a more direct one, we have an email address which is spitandpolished@gmail.com. Spitandpolished@gmail.com. You can see that in the description, I think. Or you can just type it out.
Use your fingies.
In the to part. If you want to be really fun, email someone else and put us as the BB or the BC or the CC. Especially the CC, that's the funny one.
I really like that you called it the BB.
The BB, yeah.
Which is not what it is. But
I remember that there was one.
BCC,
I remember there was one where it was 2 letters that are the same.
Yes.
Wait, is it 3 letters?
Well, yeah.
BCC?
Oh God.
CCC?
It's time to BCC. It's BBC, Bartek.
I've rarely used those.
No one
fields.
really uses them unless you're in corporate. So just letting you know that. But we are done. Everything you just heard about where the podcast can be found or where you can recommend things to us is in the description as said. And if you follow our social medias, you may see comments from other listeners, including Bartek's mother.
Sometimes.
Sometimes she likes to tell us she listened. Other times she'll tell us she will. And sometimes she doesn't follow up, and if she did, let me know. Let me know. Come on. I need to know. Did you listen? Did you listen? Leave a comment.
Ryan,
Come back and reply to say, I did it.
Ryan, which episodes does your mum listen to?
My mummy listens to some, but not all. I don't know. Soldier? I remember they listened to Soldier. So there you go. That was...
Oh, right.
Kurt
She
Russell.
loves...
We all love
Kurt
Kurt.
Russell.
Would this film have been better if Tom Hanks fell in love with Kurt Russell?
Yeah, if this film had Tom Hanks falling in love with Kurt Russell and if he was called Larry Kudlow.
Did you read the trivia fact about how Bryan Cranston
Oh, yeah.
had to beautify himself up? But he looks like a piece of shit in this movie. Like, he looks like scum.
What did it say? Like, he had to lose weight and bleach his teeth?
Yes, and work out and get a haircut. He's already a handsome guy. I don't get it. Like, you've seen Seinfeld, right?
Yeah, but Ryan, he might be a handsome guy, but he has to look like someone that Julia Roberts would be with.
Honest question. Are you that familiar with Julia Roberts?
No.
We didn't talk about her very much during the movie.
I think there was an episode forever ago where I asked, what films has she been in?
Pretty Woman.
Because she was one of those celebrity names that I knew. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a big actress, but I didn't know anything that she was in.
Erin Brockovich.
I think I based that on when I saw Goldmember, and it's like the celebrities that, number 2 says at the beginning, like, oh, those are big celebrities.
Oh, of course. Julia Roberts is the aunt of Emma. That's her fame now.
I know Emma Roberts. She was on Nickelodeon and Scream 4.